Am I the a-hole for taking my ex to court after he chose his new wife? So to start, my 33F, ex-Harry 35M, and I have been divorced for 6 years. We dated a bit in high school when I visited a relative in his hometown, which is a major city, for the summers, but I would break up with him when I went back to my city for school, which is about 2.5 hours away. Not the most mature, I know, but even my parents were like, you don't need a long-distance relationship before you can vote. We kind of kept in touch on Facebook at the time, but my sophomore year of college, he ended up transferring to my school. We got back together and got married basically right after I graduated and moved to my hometown/city. Our kids, Matt, 11, and Elise, 8, came pretty quickly. We had a few good years before. Stop me if you've heard this one. I just felt as if I was already a single mom of 3 kids. I was completely sick of working full-time, doing all the childcare, and handling all of the cleaning, cooking, and planning by myself. We tried couples therapy for a while, but ultimately we decided that it just wasn't going to work out between us. For 3+ years after the divorce, it was honestly fantastic. We had a wonderful 50-50 co-parenting relationship. He was such a better father when he had the kids all to himself and had to step up, and I finally got the regular breaks that I had been begging for during our marriage. We agreed to never badmouth the other in front of the kids, never make them feel responsible for our feelings or anything toxic like that. We didn't have to spend a fortune on a bitter divorce because we were able to amicably work everything out ourselves, which only benefited our kiddos. In late 2022, he let me know he had gotten back together with Amy, 35F. He said her name a bunch like I should automatically know who she was. I finally asked, and apparently, she was the girl he had dated back when I wasn't in town, right before we reconnected in college. I was honestly really happy for him. I'm not interested in dating, to be completely honest. My kids are too young, I work a lot, and I already have a ton of close friends and family to keep me busy. Amy lived in his hometown, and I know he visited her a lot when he didn't have the kids. We were on a week-on, week-off schedule, but he was always there for his assigned parenting time without issue. The kids met Amy and told me they liked her a lot, so I was really happy with how things were going. My own parents were divorced when I was growing up, but they both found other people while still remaining amazing, present parents to me, so I was really hopeful we could do the same. But in 2023, he let me know he had proposed to Amy and would be moving back to his hometown to be with her. I was pretty stunned when he dropped that news because up until that point he had been such a dedicated and present father. I asked him point-blank how he expected that arrangement to work with the kids living 2.5 hours away. He was insistent that he wanted to keep 50-50 custody, but he admitted he could realistically only do every other weekend parenting time due to the distance. Before he moved, we didn't have any formal sort of alimony or child support set up since we were doing true 50-50 and just split all big expenses evenly. He said he would keep splitting big expenses evenly and offered to pay me child support since my daily expenses for the kids would obviously be going up significantly, having them so much more. Not that I was complaining about having my kids more, of course. Again, we wanted to work this out ourselves without getting toxic. Why spend a ton of money on lawyers when we have 2 kids who could actually use that money? I make a bit more money than him. Not that that really matters, but the first amount he offered was $400 a month for 2 kids, which was frankly laughable. I didn't laugh directly at him or anything, but I calmly told him that amount would not be acceptable for raising 2 growing children full-time. He countered by saying he was willing to continue paying half of all big expenses, which, obviously, that's standard. Plus, he'd be driving a 5-hour round trip every other weekend since he was the one moving away. I thought about it a lot. I figured that I am fine financially, as much as anyone is these days, and I really didn't want to bankrupt him or make his life miserable over child support. The most important thing to me was simply that he continued to be a present and amazing father to Matt and Elise. So, I told him I would be okay with $600 a month plus splitting the big expenses. I honestly thought he would be happy with this compromise, but he kept grumbling that he thought $400 was more than fair. Ultimately, after some back and forth, he agreed to the $600. Again, I really wanted to make this co-parenting dynamic work for my kids, so please don't tell me I was an idiot for some of these decisions. I really went out of my way to be as helpful and accommodating as possible. Like I said, I am single and have a ton of family and friends around, so I naturally had a bit more free schedule flexibility. If he and Amy had things going on, I never minded keeping the kids for their scheduled weekend. I always encouraged the kids to be excited to go visit their dad, and I routinely bought gifts from the kids for things like Father's Day, Mother's Day for Amy, Christmas, and their birthdays. I don't know if I fully believe in love languages, but if my kids have them, it is absolutely gift-giving, and it's not like they're young asses of jobs to buy things themselves. I even worked it out for my relative who lives in their city to pick our kids up from Harry and Amy's wedding ceremony so they could attend, since they had decided on an adults-only reception. These kind gestures were never once reciprocated. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was just doing too much and needed to take a step back. But then the kids casually told me that during some of the weekends they were scheduled to be with their dad, and I agreed to keep them. Harry and Amy had actually gone on expensive vacations to places like Europe and Disney World. I don't follow either of them on social media, obviously, so I had no idea that was the reason behind his requests. I go on vacations too, but the sheer idea of going on such an expensive, fun vacation and intentionally leaving my kids behind sounds completely nuts to me. My kids are great travelers. We actually went to Japan last summer and had an absolute blast together. Maybe I'm just an annoying parent, but I couldn't believe he would leave the country or go to freaking Disney World and not only leave his kids out, but not even have the courtesy to let me know that was why he was asking me to take his parenting time. I had tried so hard to remain amicable, but after I found that out, the extra favors completely stopped. For the past few months, anytime he asked me to keep the kids for a weekend because they had plans, I just say, "Oh, sorry, we have plans too, good luck." Yes, even if he asked far in advance. I wasn't trying to be petty, but it wasn't as if they were ever asking to switch weekends so he could see them another time. It was always just straight up skipping his time with them. I know his family is useless when it comes to helping out, and I have no idea about hers, but a father should be able to make time for his own children 4 days out of a month. Then, a few months ago, I found out he'd been bypassing me and directly asking my relatives in his city for childcare help when he had the kids on his weekends. Sometimes my relatives did help if they were free, but not always. I was horrified and didn't want him to keep bothering my family, so I ended up agreeing to keep the kids more often again. Plus, I obviously love having my kids around. But this time, I started meticulously keeping track of every single time he asked me to keep them or skipped his weekend. Over a 5-month period, he flaked out 5 separate times. Around that same time, Matt ended up confiding some pretty upsetting things to me. He admitted that he was actually much happier staying at my house full-time. I made sure to sit him down and be crystal clear that he could tell me anything, that he would never be in trouble, and that none of the adult situation was his fault at all. That was when he laid out what actually goes on during their weekends at their dad's house. He told me that both he and his sister are required to be locked in their bedrooms by 8 p.m. every single night they are there. Keep in mind, this is on weekends. They aren't required to be asleep, but they are strictly forbidden from being in the living room, watching TV downstairs, or having any friends over. I asked Matt if his dad and Amy were even home during these early room curfews, and he said yeah, they were. But then he explained that Amy's dog is super aggressive. They keep the dog locked in Amy and Harry's bedroom all day long while the kids are awake, so when 8 p.m. rolls around, Matt and Elise are forced into their rooms so they can let the dog out to roam the house without biting anyone. I love dogs. We have 2 of our own, but what the absolute fuck? It got worse. Elise got a really bad case of the flu a few visits back. She was feeling miserable and feverish, and she had asked Harry if he would sleep in her room with her for the night to comfort her. He flat out refused, telling an 8-year-old sick child that he needed to sleep in his own bed with Amy. Now, our kids do not normally co-sleep with us, but if they're sick and scared, we have always let them sleep with us or stayed by their side until they felt better. I didn't expect Harry and Amy to bring a sick kid into their bed, especially since both kids are strictly banned from entering their master bedroom at all because of the aggressive dog. But why on earth couldn't he have pulled up a chair or laid on the floor in her room until she fell asleep? I did not voice any of this anger to my kids. Instead, I swallowed my rage and told Matt and Elise that their dad had probably just gotten over the flu himself and didn't want to catch her bugs or get her sick again. I know it makes no sense, and I shouldn't have lied to cover for him, but they were already so visibly upset and rejected. The absolute worst part came when Matt mentioned a conversation he had with his father. Matt had randomly told his dad that he wished he could see him more and spent more quality time with him. Instead of being comforting, Harry completely snapped at him. He yelled at an 11-year-old boy and told him that he was already seeing him plenty and that Matt should want his dad to be happy instead of being miserable and alone like his mom. I would like to again strongly reiterate that I am extremely happy being single. I have turned down plenty of guys who have asked me out. I genuinely prefer to spend my free time with my close friends and my kids, and I can worry about dating when the kids are older. I don't like the statistics regarding unrelated men being around young children, and I simply don't feel the need to risk my kids' safety or peace for a relationship right now. So, between the neglectful behavior, the aggressive dog rules, the emotional verbal outbursts at my son, and all the missed visitation weekends, I decided enough was enough. I needed to stand up for myself and, more importantly, protect my kids. If Harry had the disposable income to go on lavish European vacations, he could certainly afford to pay appropriate child support. I was completely done keeping up the fake public appearance of 50-50 joint custody when he had literally only exercised his custody rights for about 45 total nights in all of 2024. I called Harry and directly informed him that I was going to formally file for updated child support and primary legal custody through the courts, so everything would be legally binding and signed off by a judge. Surprisingly, he initially said he was fine with raising child support. He casually mentioned that he had gotten a few significant raises at work since we had first settled things, and he said he would be fine with upping his monthly payment to $750. I was floored. First of all, you got all these raises at work and didn't even think to offer a dime more for your children, despite skipping almost half of your agreed visitation time? And second, $750 for 2 kids in this economy is an insult. I told him straight up that the amount was insulting and that we could just let the family court figure out the official numbers based on state guidelines. He immediately got defensive and reminded me that I made much more money than he did. I snapped back and said, "Yeah, that's exactly why I'm actually able to take our kids on nice vacations, while apparently you couldn't scourge up enough money or care to take your own children to Disney World." I know that comment was a bit immature of me, but I was so deeply pissed off at his audacity. He tried to start a huge argument over the phone, but I told him firmly that I had zero intention of fighting with him outside of a courtroom, hung up, and officially filed the legal paperwork. Obviously, because I'm writing this post today, the judge looked at the actual visitation records, income statements, and facts, and agreed to almost all of my legal requests. Child support was significantly increased. I was officially granted primary physical custody and sole legal decision-making power, and the court order specifies that his support can be adjusted even higher if he continues his pattern of skipping his scheduled weekends. To be completely honest, this official legal ruling has helped me tremendously with handling the kids' increasing daily expenses, school costs, and overall needs. Since the court date, Harry and I only communicate strictly via text or email, and it is strictly limited to necessary logistics about the kids. However, a mutual friend of ours recently came to me and revealed that at a wedding they all attended, Amy and Harry spent a massive chunk of the night aggressively complaining about me to anyone who would listen. They were publicly calling me high conflict, a parasite, and an awful bitter ex. As they drank more alcohol throughout the night, they said much worse, vile things about my character that I won't even repeat here. Hearing that really got to me and shook my confidence. My one and only goal in all of this has always been for my kids to have a happy, healthy childhood and a present, loving father. Looking at how fractured everything is now, I feel like I completely fucked that up for them. My friends keep reassuring me that Harry is the only one who fucked things up through his own selfish actions, but I'm sitting here deeply doubting myself and feeling terrible. So, am I the a-hole for pushing my ex to do more? Update. Unfortunately, things have only gotten worse since my last post. To answer one of the most common questions, yes, I'm in therapy. These days, I usually go every other month, although it was much more frequent right after the divorce. Both of my kids are in therapy as well, and I'm grateful they have someone neutral to talk to. As for Harry, I know he was seeing someone while he still lived here before Amy, but I honestly have no idea whether he still sees a therapist or anyone else. It's not something I keep tabs on. The newest issue started with his scheduled parenting weekend. He was supposed to have the kids next weekend, exactly as outlined in our court order. A few days ago, he called and, somehow, I already knew where the conversation was heading before he even finished the first sentence. He and Amy had managed to get last-minute tickets to an out-of-town concert and wanted to know if I could keep the kids instead. Normally, I would have sighed, opened my calendar, marked off another missed visitation, and rearranged my own life around his plans. That's exactly what I've done for years. This time was different because I actually had plans of my own that had been scheduled months in advance. They weren't anything life-changing, but they were commitments I intended to keep. I told him I wasn't available. He immediately started looking for alternatives that still involved me solving the problem. He asked whether I could simply bring the kids along with me or leave them with one of my relatives in my city. That was the moment I realized absolutely nothing had changed. In his mind, every solution still depended on someone else stepping in so he wouldn't have to give up what he wanted to do. I told him he needed to figure it out himself. I also made it clear that he was not to start calling my relatives looking for childcare. They are not his personal, unpaid babysitters. They've already helped far more than anyone should reasonably expect, and they're doing it because they love my children, not because they're responsible for covering his parenting time. That's when he told me he was drowning. I honestly almost laughed because of how absurd it sounded after everything that's happened, but I managed not to. I asked him what he meant, and he said he was struggling financially because of child support. According to him, I was punishing him for moving away. Then, he had the nerve to tell me I needed to stop being angry that our marriage ended, put the kids first, and start working with him again. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. This is someone who knows exactly why our marriage ended. He knows I filed for divorce because I was already functioning like a single parent while we were married. He also knows I spent years bending over backwards to preserve our co-parenting relationship afterward. I have pages and pages of texts and emails where he thanked me for being accommodating, flexible, and understanding. Some of those messages weren't even old. A few were only weeks before this conversation. I was at work and had meetings starting soon, so instead of continuing an argument that clearly wasn't going anywhere, I ended the call. He immediately started calling back. When I didn't answer, Amy began calling too. I let every call go to voicemail. She left several messages. None of them surprised me. According to her, I'm bitter, jealous, obsessed with Harry moving on, and determined to punish them for being happy together. I cannot emphasize this enough. I would rather cut my own legs off than get back together with my ex-husband. I filed for divorce. I never regretted filing for divorce. I've turned down relationships because I enjoy the life I've built with my kids, my friends, and my family. Somehow they have convinced themselves that everything I do revolves around jealousy of Amy, despite years of evidence showing the exact opposite. I helped them repeatedly after they married. I covered weekends, bought gifts from the kids, rearranged holidays, coordinated schedules, and even helped make their wedding easier. None of that fits the fantasy they've created, so they simply ignore it. When I got home that evening, I decided I was done relying on memory. I pulled out my calendar covering the past 2 years. Every missed visitation was already documented. I had every cancellation, every last-minute request, every weekend they voluntarily gave up, all color-coded because that's how I've kept track of everything involving the kids. Looking at it all together was honestly shocking, even for me. I scanned the relevant pages and emailed them to both Harry and Amy. My email was short. I told them Harry was responsible for arranging appropriate childcare during his parenting time. If he genuinely could no longer manage the current schedule, then we should discuss modifying visitation to something that reflected reality instead of pretending he still exercised the amount of parenting time listed in the order. After sending the email, I took the kids to their sports practices and tried not to think about it. Harry usually calls the kids every school night around 8 o'clock to say goodnight. That night he didn't call. I hated how guilty I felt. No matter how frustrated I am with him, I have never wanted my children to feel abandoned. After waiting a while, I actually called him myself, so the kids could still talk to their dad. He sent me straight to voicemail. I told Matt and Elise that he'd probably gotten caught up at work, because that does happen sometimes, and I didn't want them sitting there wondering why he hadn't called. Around 3 in the morning, my phone woke me up. I have sleep mode turned on, but calls and messages from Harry and my parents are allowed through in case something happens involving the kids. Half asleep, I saw what looked like the longest text message ever written. I decided it could wait until morning. I wish I hadn't. By the time I woke up, there were several more waiting. Reading them honestly felt like stepping into another universe because they bore so little resemblance to reality. One of the first things he claimed was that it was my responsibility, as the children's mother, to facilitate their relationship with him because he had allowed me to stay in my hometown after the divorce. Apparently, I should be grateful he didn't somehow force me to move to his city. I have absolutely no idea where he got that idea, because nothing even remotely like that was ever possible. He also complained that I never thanked Amy enough for opening her life to my children. His examples included keeping her aggressive dog locked in their bedroom while the kids were awake and allowing them to have bedrooms in their house, despite the fact those rooms often sit empty because the kids are only there a few days each month. Another section was devoted to explaining that he and Amy were young newlyweds who deserved to enjoy the honeymoon phase of their marriage by taking trips and having experiences without me putting obstacles in their way. They're 33 and 35 years old. They're not 22-year-olds who unexpectedly became parents. They're adults who knowingly chose to blend families and still have responsibilities to 2 children. Then came several paragraphs insisting I've secretly been jealous of Amy from the very beginning and that all of my actions stem from resentment that Harry moved on. Again, completely detached from reality. He also accused me of being unreasonable because I have never driven the children to his city. The court order specifically requires him to handle transportation because he was the one who moved away. That's standard. Beyond that, my kids already spend far too much time in the car every other weekend. I'm not adding several more hours to their travel just so he can drive less. Ironically, I had previously suggested splitting the cost of flights between our cities. It's about a 30-minute flight compared to a 5-hour round-trip drive. The tickets aren't cheap, usually somewhere around $50 to $75 each, but it would save the children hours of travel. He rejected the idea because he thought getting to the airport in my city was inconvenient. At one point, he even wrote that maybe he and Amy should just seek full custody themselves, so I could experience what it feels like to jump through hoops to see my own children. That sentence genuinely left me speechless. The final accusation was that increasing child support amounted to financial abuse because I wasn't living in poverty before the increase. Apparently, In his mind, if I'm financially stable, then our children no longer deserve financial support from their father. I ended up taking today off work because I simply couldn't focus after reading everything. Yes, I screenshotted every message and immediately forwarded everything to my attorney. The hardest part of all this is that I still don't want my kids to lose their father. That has never changed. I've spent years making sacrifices to keep that relationship alive. I've rearranged schedules, handled almost all the planning, coordinated holidays months in advance, switched weekends so they could celebrate Father's Day together, worked around birthdays, covered missed weekends, and absorbed almost all of the mental load that comes with raising two children while trying to maintain a healthy co-parenting relationship. I'm exhausted. I don't recognize the person Harry has become, or maybe this is who he's always been, and I simply had enough distance after the divorce to finally see it clearly. Either way, I can't keep sacrificing my own peace or my children's stability just to preserve the appearance of a co-parenting relationship that only one parent is actually maintaining. I wanted my kids to grow up with a present father. I still want that, but I can't make someone choose to be present. At this point, I'm done carrying that responsibility for him. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.